I'm Al Forster, and this is a presentation on APiOS BigSurEditn. Basically, about 3 months ago, a individual working on the Raspberry Pi 4 project group came out with a skin over the top of a Manjaro OS KDE Plasma 20.08 edition of a 64-bit operating system that is Linux-based. This is a presentation of that individual's development, and I'll just play a little of it.
I want to show you guys something that I've been working hard on for a while. So the reason I haven't been uploading a lot is one reason is because of school, and one reason is because of customizing and trying to make this as best as I could. So I finally finished it, and you guys can download it down below. So what this is called APiOS BigSurEditn, and this is based off Manjaro KDE Plasma 20.08. And
that's enough of that. There are several additional presentations that have been given about this APiOS BigSurEditn, and I was intrigued because I've always used Apple Macintosh and iPhones, and therefore I was intrigued to see how many of the features that this Linux distribution has that the Macintosh has. So let's just go, and what I did was I added several additional elements that weren't included in this distribution, and you can get them from either of my web links that are shown down below here. Let's see, one of them is www.avfconsults.com, and the other one is www.twoclients.com. So you can go to either of those and download this edition of the APiOS BigSurEditn Plus that includes a virtual network connection server and the use of a remote Desktop-VNC application to connect to it. It also includes the addition of what's called Cheese, which allows me to interact with a webcam attached through a USB port, because the internal camera associated with Raspberry Pis does not work, and no one's been able to really figure out why. There's also Bluetooth keyboard connectability, which wasn't available in the initial Raspberry, the initial Big Sur distribution. And finally, I am also, basically you couldn't use a camera, you couldn't use Bluetooth, and you couldn't use some of the video features associated with the Manjaro operating system. So let's get into it. Okay, at this point, this is a pretty neat operating system. It shows us all of the same kind of icons that we would see in the BigSurEditn of Apple's latest distribution called Big Sur. You can basically get to a launch pad that has a whole series of applications that you can run. These are the ones that are installed. There are hundreds of additional ones that you can install, just like Apple's Store has a series of applications that you can run and install. You just click off of this and you're back to the main screen. The password for this is APiOS, all lowercase, no spaces between the words. And Dolphin is used to bring up the filing system. So if we wanted to go home, we see desktop, pictures, documents, videos, similar downloads, similar things that we would have seen, public and music, all things that we would have seen in a normal Mac operating system. The desktop has several applications in it, and you can see those over here on the side. And the presentations that you can go to explain all of this. What I'm really interested in was to be able to get VCN working, and what I'm recording this on is a MacMini, i7 MacMini that has plenty of disk drive space and 16 gigs of RAM, and can handle this kind of video load. I tried to do it on the Raspberry Pi version of that you see running in front of you over a virtual network connection, but I was not able to. There's just not enough memory and maybe not enough horsepower to do that. In the Documents directory, I have several terminal commands that are very useful, and it basically explains that the useful terminal commands are like ls to list a directory when you're in terminal, cd to change directories, sudo gets you down to what's called root and allows you to modify files that would normally be locked out to you so that you couldn't modify them. The VNC access, we would basically minimize the window that's running the virtual network connection, and that command is xo VNC server RFB AUTH space tilde slash dot VNC dot password, and this launches the server with the appropriate password connectability. I'll show you how that's done in a second. Then there's also another command here, vcgen command measure temperature, which shows the CPU temperature. So I'll demonstrate both of those right now. To the one connection that we have set up right now is shown here, and it's basically running the X0 version of a virtual network connection server. So I can't shut it down, but I can minimize it. If I need another connection so that I can show you that temperature command, then what I would do is go to the Apple menu here, select the server, and you get another occurrence of the server. So the first one is still running the virtual network connection. The second one, you can press the up arrow and you can get back to the connections that have been made and the commands that have been done in the past. Both of these commands that I talked about I've just done, so I just have to hit the up arrow a couple of times to find them. So it tells me that the temperature of my Raspberry Pi is 37.4 degrees centigrade. So that's pretty good. I have a little fan associated with the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi 4 with 4 gigs of memory and a 64 gig basically file storage card in it. Basically the Raspberry Pi 4 gig is about $45, and the memory card is another $23. So you can be into this and you can have access. And because these skins, a number of people have put different skins on that look like Apple operating system or look like a virtual, like a Windows operating system or a Linux operating system, Ubuntu, are all available to you, and you can run them if you're using a Mac or a Windows machine. You can run them through one of these virtual network connections. I also said that I added the Cheese application for a webcam, so let's bring that up. And if you want to add, when you install one of these, when you install, I'm going to bring up the, oops, had to make that a little bit smaller and now a little bit larger again. Okay, when you install one of these applications, you would use the app installer, which in Linux is called in this particular Manjaro release is called Mac/manager. And if we open it up, we'll see what that manager does. Basically, it tells us everything that's installed. Under communications, you can see that the Tiger VNC viewer is installed, and with that VNC viewer is this X0 VNC server that we're using. I also installed Thunderbird. In the original distribution, Claw Mail was installed, and but I discovered that with Gmail, Gmail wouldn't accept it because it didn't have enough security associated with it. But the Thunderbird version installs very simply, very easily, and if I wanted, and you can take any of these. They'll be shown here. For example, under Internet, there's Thunderbird or the VNC server. And if I wanted to install those on the bar down here, I just drag it over to here, drop it, and the Tiger VNC viewer, for example, is now installed on the bar for you to use. These are things that really weren't discussed in any of the other videos. Cheese is an application that allows you to use a webcam. Now I have a little webcam set up here that you'd usually attach to the top of the monitor, but I've brought it around to the front of the monitor so you can see what I have here. This is the Raspberry Pi. That's a Raspberry Pi 4 gig. The one that I'm running is a Raspberry Pi 8 gig. And I think 8 gig may be the starting point for something that would be very useful as a desktop replacement for a more expensive computer. You can get a Raspberry 400, which includes a keyboard, and the computer is right in the keyboard itself, for about $75. And if you want to buy the kit that includes a chip, a 64 gig chip, and the mouse, that's about $100. So basically you can get into something like this, a 64-bit operating system, for $100, rather than with the Macs something like $1,000 to $3,000. So I just wanted you to see what the video, and you can take a photograph. So if I click here, it'll take a photograph after the countdown. So it took that picture, and there's the picture there that I can look at or save. right mouse click on the picture and I can save it as, or move to trash, or delete it, or open it. So that's how the Cheese webcam interface works. The webcam that I'm using is a 1080p web camera that costs about $35 from Amazon. The Bluetooth keyboards that I've been able to connect to, I wasn't able to connect with the original distribution. I had to add some additional software. And as you can see, here's a large keyboard that you can use through Bluetooth with this system, or a small keyboard that has its own trackpad that also works just fine using the Bluetooth interface. So that's all I have. Hope this was helpful, and you can get the distribution from either of my two websites. One is avfconsults.com and the other is twoclients.com. There's also a YouTube link to this video if you're interested in seeing it again or telling anybody else about it. Thank you, and I'll